Okay, so welcome everybody to the second in our series of 30-minute webinars. So the idea with these is meant to be a sort of a bite-sized bit of kind of insight, bit of information from us, from the team, about things that we find interesting, things that hopefully you'll find interesting, and tips and techniques really from the trenches, as I say. So this runs every 2 weeks, every Wednesday, every 2 weeks. And the format of this will be about 20 minutes for Amir to talk about the topic, which in this case is about Dagster and Cube and presets. We've got Q&A at the end. If you have any questions, put them into the chat session and we'll follow up on them afterwards and try and answer them at the end. If we don't, then we'll send out the answers via email, but we'll try and answer them during the actual session. Quick plug for us, we're a modern day stack consultancy based in the UK. We work with these tools we're going to talk about in this session, work with these all the time. We're partners with Cube and with DBT Labs and Snowflake and so on. And we offer services to take you through all the kind of stages in your analytics journey, from data strategy through to enablement at the end. So any more information you want, then come to our website, it's all on there. And there's a quick start as well we offer for Cube at the end that I'll talk to you about at the end as well. So over to Amir.
Thanks, Mark. So here we are, your host for today. My name is Amir Jaber. I'm a senior analytics engineering consultant here at Rittman Analytics. And, Mark is my co-host for today, and you may know him as the CEO of Rittman Analytics. Mm-hmm. Now, our agenda for today is to look at these tools that we have focused on for this webinar. Which is Cube, Preset, and Dagster. And we're going to give you a bit of an overview of them to start with, but then we're going to demo how we use them in our workflow. And we're going to have a few new features on them at the end as well. And then after that, like we mentioned, there'll be time for the Q&A. So we use a variety of tooling, and it depends on the client needs. In this webinar, we zeroed in on Preset, Cube, and Dagster, which, that combination might be suitable for like a growth client that has configuration engineering capabilities, but they don't want to go that extra step and manage the full infrastructure. And so for those of you who don't know them, Preset is a self-service BI tool that offers data visualization, and they have a rich visuals library. Cube is a semantic layer, sort of translating your business logic to SQL queries that go against your warehouse. And it enables headless BI by allowing BI tools such as Preset to connect to it and call those semantics. And one of the useful features of Cube is query acceleration, which does things like pre-aggregation and caching. Now, last but not least, we've got Dagster. So that offers data orchestration with declarative data pipelines. So you can focus on the what you want to do, not necessarily the how. Dagster will handle all that for you. And so those are the specifics around these tools. But what they all share that we find is relevant is they have an open source core offering. So, you can tinker with things locally, and if you have a use case that they don't currently support, you could even contribute to it, and it might make its way into the project. They also allow for configuration fully in code, which is great because, the use of like a software engineering practice is really key to our workflow. And we find it's crucial for the modern data stack as well, because you get things like CI/CD, you get version control, and proper governance. And then finally, they have API connectability, which allows the interaction between them that, form the backbone for making that a part of a fluid modern data pipeline. And now there's even more integration between them because of a couple of new features that we're excited about incorporating into our workflow. The first one is the semantic layer sync. Now that that syncs your exposed Cube objects to BI tools such as Preset, and it integrates with that BI tool's semantic functionalities. And secondly, we have the Orchestration API. So that allows orchestration of Cube features by tools such as Dagster. And we have a couple of videos demonstrating them in action coming up. So without further ado, let's go into the demos. We're starting with how we structure cube projects. And what we're going to get a sample of here is we auto-generate some base codes, and that includes inferred relationships, measures, and dimensions. And then when your business logic calls for it, you manually override things with extends. You curate the output with views, so your end users get a really nice experience, and you facilitate a nice workflow by separating your environments using environment variables. So here we go. I want to talk about how we structure our cube project and our workflow around it. And to do so, it bears highlighting how we design and model our warehouse, because it feeds into the workflow here as well. So, for example, what I have here is a base file. Now, I'll come back to the fact that it's a base file later. But if we look at the credit card BIM table here, we notice that there's a credit card PK and a credit card foreign key that it connects to on the fact sales table. So the naming here is pretty crucial. We use, standardized PK and FK suffixes, and then the same prefix on that. And what that allows us to do is to automate the development here. So it's a base file that we're looking at here, and it's base because we use tooling. For example, here I've used DWA to automate the generation of that base file, and you see that in the if demo here. You basically run a DWA Q command. It does lots of good things here. So what's happening is it infers relationships, for example. Now, if we look at the actual file that refers to, it has a cardinality here between what's on the left table, the key column there, the right table, the key column there, the cardinality between them, and then a reverse cardinality, which allows us to, in Cube, automatically generate both sides of that join, right? Like if we're in credit cards, we have the link to fact sales. If we go down to fact sales, we will have the opposite somewhere at the bottom here. To credit card, yeah, the opposite relationship there. So a lot of the heavy lifting here is done by that tool. Now, for example, the relationship inference is done by actually looking at the schema in Snowflake, finding that those columns, connect to each other, those keys, then making sample queries to infer that cardinality, depending on which side fans out, and then, yeah, automatically generates that for all the different permutations between all your different tables in the base. Now, obviously, with any sort of automation, the output here is not going to be perfect, right? You might make a join, join less so, but I guess you might infer that something is the wrong type of, measure or dimension, and so you might want to overwrite that sometimes. So in addition to our base generation, we have an extends workflow where we go in and we clean some of that up. Now, in this case, assuming you hadn't modeled your schema super nicely, for example, there might be an address prefix connected to a ship address foreign key. Now, of course, the automation wouldn't have picked that up, so you might want to go in and overwrite that yourself by adding it to your base cube and making your extend cube here dim address in this case. For example, there might also be measures on ID columns, which are numbers that were generated automatically, and you might want to remove those because they're not relevant. In addition, something we do to structure our projects is that we don't show our cubes. Instead, we tend to show our views instead, because that allows us to curate, the join paths and everything together. So all in all, that makes our workflow relatively automated, not so hands-on, and curated for the end user for readability. The final thing I mentioned here is that we use environment variables to set up environment separation. So, as you're testing this, currently I am looking at our prod environment, but if you're in development, you don't want the queries to be hitting your prod environment because you want to be able to make the change in dbt, go over in Cube, and immediately test that change. So the environment separation allows you to, or bringing in the environment variables in the SQL allows us to make that, whole development workflow integrated. So you don't have to wait for PR to be done on the DBT changes so that you can then test this in Cube by querying production.
Amir, you're silent. You're on mute, Amir.
There we go. Thanks. Yeah, so that's our Cube workflows. Now let's move over. These videos tend to auto start. There we go. So next we're going to look at how we schedule our pipelines with Dagster. And so we're going to look at why we like to use Dagster Cloud, but why we also like the option to do local development that Dagster enables. We'll talk a bit about the CI/CD we utilize as well with Dagster. And finally, how we import DBT models with view lines. Next, I'll show a sample of how we might structure a Dagster project. And the first thing I want to talk about is that we tend to prefer to use Dagster Cloud with fully serverless deployment because you don't have to worry about infrastructure. And so there's no prerequisite setup before you can actually start to get output of this. You can immediately start coding, building your assets, setting up your schedules, etc. So that is our deployment of choice. But of course, a massive benefit of Dagster is that you can develop locally and you can test things locally. So, you can run it as if it's going to be in the same environment in your cloud deployment later. But, you have your environment variables defined in your end file instead of the actual deployment itself, which hosts it for you. And you can materialize your assets locally. You can really make sure you hone out all those bugs before anything actually makes its way to production to avoid those issues where things start to break and you have this classic, but it worked on my machine. However, that might still happen because if you do just merge into main, for example, then there might be errors you didn't catch when you're testing. And there might be some difference that you forgot to make sure it was in sync between your local environment. So a final sort of filter and check on that code is to run extensive CI/CD. So, whether that be GitLab CI/CD or GitHub GitHub Actions, we make sure that the deployment is tested on a branch deployment before it actually makes its way into prod. And we set those rules on the in the repo so that you need both approval from someone, of course, but you have to have the branch deployment run successfully before it can be merged. So all in all, that makes for a relatively clean code, and as few bugs as possible for the end users. Now, the final thing I'd say about what we tend to use Dagster for is the importing of DBT jobs. So the integration with DBT is really nice because you can, just load assets from your DBT project if you have it all in the same repo. I think you can even do it if it's in a different one, but we tend to keep it all in the same repo. So you just specify your projects directory, your profiles directory, whether you want to use the build command, and there's other configuration you can do as well. But all in all, this combined with the DBT resource and schedules, if you wanted, for example, you might want to do a cron job every night, allows you to bring them into your DAG. And having it scheduled in Dagster allows you to then connect it to downstream dependencies. So a major one is, of course, if you have a pre-aggregation set up in Cube, you want to make sure that that pre-aggregation happens right after your DBT model is materialized, or if you have a 5-tran replication and your DBT models are then dependent on that, you can make sure that those models are kicked off as soon as the relevant 5-tran replications happen upstream, which could be several both ways. So Dagster really manages that complexity for you, which is really nice. And that's why we like to use it. Well, there we have it. Now, next we're going to look at one of those new features that we were talking about before, which is the semantic layer sync. One of the new releases from Cube is the semantic layer sync. Now, this radically changes the connection between Cube and preset because previously you had to go into preset, you had to make a new data set from a connection that you had to set up initially. And then if there were any measures, you had to make metrics in presets on preset side out of those. But what you can now do is to set up in a JSON file the connection from Cube using the preset API to actually sync all your semantics over it. And I'll show you what that looks like here. So basically, I have my semantic layer sync set up. My API credentials are all set up within Cube, and that now connects over to preset, which will then make a new data set. And this one is based off of sales. Now, if you look in our data model, that is actually a view because we've hidden all of our cubes. They're all false here and they're shown. So what we've done here is we've curated the columns from the different cubes that we want the end users to see. We haven't curated specifically or explicitly the join path, but if we needed to, we could have done that as well. We're letting cubes transitive joins figure that path out, and from our testing, it did a good job, so we left it at that. But now this view is the only thing that's visible or exposed in the API, and so that is also what is being pushed over into preset. So the benefit here is, of course, you can set up your connection to be, to different instances of preset. I think currently there's a Metabase also supported, so you could have, a Metabase instance as well, and they'll all have, simultaneous syncs of the same data, so they're all, they don't diverge from each other. But and in the future, as more integrations get added, all of those will have, one centralized place where that gets pushed from. And if we actually look at this preset sales data set now, we can see that they've done some neat things around the metrics here. So, wrap them around with a measure statement, which is something you had to do manually in preset before. But so now that it's all in sync, they've also changed the naming from the camel case that goes into Cube to proper naming, so it's more readable. So all of that removes the manual element of it, so people get less time and they can start just pulling metrics into their visuals. And here we go. Yeah, every day we get count of sales. Yeah, cool stuff. And finally, there is the orchestration API to look at. Video started there, sorry. Here we go. I wanted to showcase what we can do with the new orchestration API that Cube has come out with. And to do that, we're looking at a pre-aggregation in Cube here, which rolls things up based on the fact sales cube. Now, this can be kicked off in the UI, by going in here and clicking build all on this page, or it can be scheduled to do so on a regular basis, right? Like every 24 hours, for example, which this schedule has in place. But what we've now been given is a third option to kick it off with an API call. Now, this allows us to put it in an asset in Dagster, define a dependency, for example, fact sales, which is the DBT model, so that when you materialize it in as part of your Dagster DAG, it can happen right in sync. Right, as soon as fact sales has materialized in your warehouse, your pre-aggregation can be refreshed. So the benefit here is you avoid a situation where maybe say your pre-aggregation updates, every 24 hours, and for whatever reason, your DBT run was a bit slower than expected, and it missed that refresh tick that night. So all day, your analyst, if they happen to hit pre-aggregations, will miss a whole day's worth of data. And if they don't, they'll get that day, and there'll be confusion as to like what is actually in my source. So now you can keep your assets more in sync. those are all the demos we have for today. I'm just gonna go past the video to the next slide here. Cool. Mark, would you want to talk about the quick start package that we offer?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So actually, I had one question for you, Amir, actually, before we do that bit there. So how would you, how do you delineate between what you do in DBT and what you do in Dagster, really? Because they can both move data around and so on there. But what goes in DBT and what goes in Dagster? And what also goes into these pre-aggregations?
Yeah, I think you know, Dagster and DBT, they work together really nicely in terms of, when you have the data already in your warehouse, and it fits into kind of a regular SQL statement. I prefer to do that with DBT. So, one thing you might be able to do is to set up your own replication with Dagster, right? Like, and maybe even in flight, do some transformations there. I find that then you have to set up kind of the infrastructure that your warehouse can manage for you, and you have to figure things out like standoffs or incremental loads and all that good stuff, which other tooling I think is more suitable for handling. And so yeah, really I see Dagster there as the kind of the thing that connects to a bunch of endpoints and kicks things off that are more tailored to those tasks.
Okay. So one last thing for myself is, so Cube's a great product and very easy to use, and you can pick it up quite quickly, and it's designed to be self-service. But as you kind of heard from this presentation, there's quite a few things to consider around the edges and where Cube fits in and how you do things like pre-aggregations and so on. So we actually offer a Cube Quick Start package, which is a package of consulting hours over a number of weeks to get you up and running with Cube. So we can talk to you about things like the semantic model sync. We can talk to you about the orchestration API. We can also get Cube set up for you with the data modeling and so on there. So we actually offer this as a quick start package. If you're interested, drop me a line or contact me after the webinar. But that's something we can do there. We do similar things with Rudderstack and so on as well. But that's been a popular thing so far with people getting ready and getting started with Cube. Okay. So yeah, are there any other questions at all from anybody about what we've been talking about so far? Obviously, we covered quite a lot in there. And if you've got a question, maybe raise your hand or post it into the chat session. Olivier, I'm going to put you on. I'm going to allow you to talk, actually, because Olivier, you've been doing some of this stuff, haven't you? And you've also, I think you contributed a little bit towards the orchestration API. I think your name is mentioned there somewhere. You there, Olivier?
Yeah, I did. I don't know what to say about that, but yes, something that Amir did show has been contributed by us. So yeah, the integration between Dagster and Cube, and how you can kick off your pre-aggregations from Dagster, that has been contributed by us. Yes.
Fantastic, excellent. And Amir, you've been using Cube on projects, haven't you, as well? So without mentioning who it is, you've been using this quite a bit. And that semantic layer sync there, I think you said itself, would be quite useful in that project, won't it, really?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because currently you have to go in to basically each of the data sets that are connected. You refresh them when you make changes. So, if you made lots of changes that affected a bunch of different views, now that's one click to have all of those sync downstream to your BI tool, and then making measures out of those would also have to be a manual effort. So if you forgot to do that anywhere, and even if you didn't, it's just like labor intensive. So it's a really exciting addition.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, all right then. Well, what we'll do then, we'll wrap up things now. Thank you very much for coming along. I think there's a last slide there as well, Amir, isn't there? I think the next session we're doing. There you go. So the next session we're doing is in 2 weeks' time, and it will be about the very topical topic of ChatGPT and LLMs, and really how you can use that whether you can use that for DBT coding. I'll take you through some examples of that and show you kind of how we've been using ChatGPT as well in some work we do around DBT. So that's the next session we're doing on Wednesday, the 12th of July, 4 o'clock UK time. Other than that, Amir, thank you very much for running this session for us. And yeah, thanks. We'll post the video on YouTube soon, and with links there to all the bits and pieces we've been talking about. So thank you very much, and thanks, Amir.